Yeah.
Yeah.
This connects to Facebook as well, or how does
It
that?
conne- yeah, it connects directly to Facebook.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, yeah. That's why yeah, I really prefer this one a lot to Zoom because it works so quick and so easy. It's funny. Somebody thought you were somebody else. They're like, "Hey, man, tell him it's not cool about Biden." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" But it's just somebody with a similar last name.
That's I agree with them.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're joined this hour by Joy Villarreal, and we're gonna talk today about he's an author, he's a radio host, he's a revolutionary thinker, community organizer, and he's really working right now towards generally speaking towards the abolition of solitary confinement within prisons, and he's tell you more about that and why as the conversation continues. But I really like to begin, Joy, this conversation with talking about some of the books that you produced.
Yeah. So I spent some time in prison, which I like to call the concentration camps here in the United Snakes, and my time during my time in solitary confinement, about 10 years, I began to draw, revolutionary art. I thought it was very important. I began to study it, and because I was imprisoned, I knew that physically I could not really contribute too much outside of the prison. However, I found that I could contribute in many um, through artwork and through writing, um, and that's basically through cultural work, revolutionary culture. So I began to do that. I began to write articles and send them into different publications and stuff like that. But so in the midst of this art campaign, I ended up producing in the 10 years probably approximately over 200 pieces of art. So when I was released, I ended up publishing them in a book. And first, I created Aslan Press. Um, and Aslan Press is, it's a publishing press that focuses on prisoners. It's a Chicano press. It focuses on primarily on prisoners or ex-prisoners, prisoners' families. And so I ended up putting together this book. This is Aslan Realism, Chicano Revolutionary Art in Pelican Bay Shoe. Um, and so this is the art that I created, and it's over 200 pieces. I thought that was very important because up until that time, um, prison, so-called, what's called prison art, was mostly you know um, artwork depicting women. I mean, there was some cultural, a lot of cultural, a lot of Mexica art, but there was also a lot of art, within the prison system depicting women, showing, breasts, showing, in thongs, and, drawing Mercedes Benz, and, all of this kind of stuff. And,
Yeah,
this is because of the society we live in. We live in a capitalist society. So many times, the oppressed, oftentimes mimic the oppressor in many ways and aspire to be, to acquire what the oppressor has. In a capitalist society, that means accumulation of just stuff, and the more stuff you have, the more that you're looked upon as successful. And this is a capitalist society and culture that it just goes on, what you can acquire selfishly for yourself. And so I wanted to change that narrative by creating art um, that was progressive, that was educational, that promoted the idea of liberation, of national liberation. Because I'm a Chicano, I began to draw art that depict the Chicano nation struggling for liberation, struggling against capitalism, struggling against America, the oppressor nation. So I began to do this art and share it with prisoners, share it in publications that the prisoners subscribe to, um, and I began to do that as best as I could. And what ended up happening is, I ended up with all this art. I published it in this book, and so that was a very, very good thing. But there was also another book that I got involved in as well, and this book was called Chicano Power and the Struggle for Aslan, and this is the other book. And so this book here, this was very, very important. This came out of political science, a revolutionary political science correspondence course that I was enrolled in prison, um, and while in solitary confinement. So I was, almost the entire 10 years I was engaging in this study group, revolutionary political science, and within this study group, I noticed, a lot of the things that we were studying. We studied, politics from around the world, revolutionary, um, different uprisings and governments around the world. We, of course, what took place in 1917 Russia, what took place in 1949 China. We, other parts of the world as well, and here in the U.S. So we study different groups, different resistance groups, revolutionary groups within these false U.S. borders. Black Panthers, of course, the histories around race, the American Indian movement, Young Lords Party, the Weathermen, the Liberation Army, all of these different groups. And, I thought it was great. However, I seen that, I really wanted to, study Chicano revolutionary history. And that history was very, very tiny. Um, and, there's some books, mostly by academia, people who participated in the Chicano movement, but had moved into academia, etc. And there was not many books, current, contemporary, revolutionary Chicano books that were still pushing for national liberation. And I felt that that was something was wrong with that. So, I began to write a pamphlet, and I wanted it to be distributed within the prison system for other Chicano prisoners who wanted to study their own history and, their own movement. Because of course we're a part of a greater movement, even a international movement around the world against uh, imperialism, capitalism, etc. However, we do have, national. We do have our own national interests as well. As a Chicano nation, we do have issues that are distinctly Chicano, that may not pertain to somebody in directly pertain to somebody in Nigeria or in Malaysia, etc. So I wanted to create something that, to do a deep study into Chicano history and our own development here in the United Snakes, and so that's what I did. So I began doing a deep study of the Chicano people, and to see, for myself, did we develop into a nation? And as I began to, and I got, bunch of books and bunch of articles and bunch of information online. And during my investigation, my deep study, I found that not only did we develop into a nation, but we also should be struggling for national liberation, in unity with other oppressed peoples, of course. However, we do have interests that are distinctly of our people, and that was very important to me. So, after I finished the pamphlet, the organization that I was taking this correspondence revolutionary political science course with, called MIM Prisons, the Maoist Internationalist Movement Prisons, you know, they, asked if I'd like to expand on the pamphlet and turn it into a book. And so I agreed. I was teamed up with another prisoner, Chicano prisoner, and we began to write this. And it was all during through correspondence. It was strictly through the mail. Of course, I was in solitary confinement at the time, and and the book was finally published in 2015. It has history in there. It has, going back to the Spanish invasion, but then all the way up till today, it has political line, ideology. It has book reviews. It has, it has, it's been described as a handbook for revolution, as a study guide, um, and a history book all in one. So, um, that's what I did, and so this book came out, and it's a very important book, and and yeah, so you can get the book. It's online. I believe the Chicano Power book is on, everything from Amazon to you name it. You can
Yeah.
also contact me as well for the art book. My Facebook is Joey Villarreal. My Instagram, I have a Aslan Press Instagram. Also, Villarreal6185 is my Instagram. And, you could contact me and learn more about the books. But that's the story on two books there.
So, for those who are not familiar, because there's a wide variety of people who are watching this, um, they might take notice that anytime there's Chicano art, and particularly when it's political, there's always this recalling to a time before the Spanish invasion, right? Now you see this. I mean, even when it isn't necessarily revolutionary or even that political, there's always this. You can go to a Mexican restaurant, you can see, Cuauhtemoc, everywhere in the Mexican culture is this recollection
Mhm.
before before the Spaniards, right? So can you speak a little bit to those who are not Chicano, not Mexican, not coming from this background, as to why these images and iconography is so important to the Chicano people, so important to the Mexicano people? What does this mean to everybody? Why?
I'm sure it means many things to many people. I know for me, it's a direct connection to our revolutionary history. It's not just romanticizing Pancho Villa and Zapata, but it's connecting us to our our revolutionary history of our people, before we developed under U.S. imperialism. This parents, our great grandparents, these are where our ancestors came from, and our ancestors, even going back to the Mexica days, um, were in resistance to the colonizers, to the oppressors, which at that time was Spanish oppressors. When you move up to the Mexican Revolution, and it's also, a concrete example of our people's struggles against, colonization and against oppressors, because even the Mexican Revolution, that was a struggle against capitalism. You know and but the thing is, because the conditions today, I believe, are a result that, Mexico, the Mexican Revolution, wasn't a socialist revolution, and I think that that's the reason why, Mexico's in the situation it is today. Had it been a socialist revolution, we might be having a whole different conversation, and even this book, Chicano Power, may have been a whole different book. So that changed everything. And so I think that it's important that we understand our history. We learn from, Marx. Karl Marx said something like, learn from history in order to transform the future. So, that's something that we have to do. We can't transform the future without understanding our history. So it's very important that we outline, our history. We understand why were our people fighting, Why were they in resistance? Why was there a Mexican Revolution? And you know, and we have to understand these things if we know, otherwise we'll repeat them. So we don't want to repeat the same thing we're doing, so we have to learn from history in order to change our game plan for the future. It's the same thing with here in us borders. um, the history, a lot of people, they um, look back to the 1960s and 70s, where there were very good examples. However, there were also many mistakes, and so we learn from the 1960s and 70s, not just the good, but the bad, the mistakes. We learn about patriarchy within the movement. We learn about things like COINTELPRO, and there wasn't just one COINTELPRO, as one camarada explained to me, that there was over a dozen COINTELPROs. There was many different, but we always refer to COINTELPRO singular. And in reality, it was COINTELPROs. So there was many programs that were initiated. So we have to learn from all this stuff. Um, in order to know how to organize today and how to move today, through this culture of repression that we are under here under U.S. imperialism. So history is important. Pancho Villa and Zapata, these are important heroes to Mexican people. However, we're not just looking to better days. We're looking to them to inspire us to continue that struggle that's in our bloodline. This is a revolutionary struggle that gold flows through our bloodline. So we want to look to it, learn from it. What were their mistakes? What were their strengths, weaknesses? Study the contradictions. Dialectics is very important. Study the contradictions in everything, including the Mexican Revolution. And what they did, what they should have done. And so all of this is important if we ever want to, change the future. We have to know history.
Yeah, and so I think it was really interesting. Right before this COVID thing broke out, um, there was a few articles in the New York Times and some other major periodicals describing the Mexican muralist movement as perhaps the most important artistic movement of the 20th century, right? Now, to me, the fact that the Mexican muralist movement is the most important fact of the 20th century is relatively obvious, unless you're a racist, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like the fact of the matter is that you can go to Paris, you can go to like Nairobi, you can go to anywhere in the world, and you're going to see murals all over the walls, right? People
Right.
painting the history of their country and their people on the wall, right? And that's just something that everyone does now, and it began with Mexico, right? So obviously, it was a very simple idea, like paint your history, put it on a wall, make it public, let everyone see.
Right.
But it's an idea that caught the world's imagination. And I think in many ways, that kind of stuff has been carried over here in the United States. In many cities where you see there's a significant Rasa population, you're going to see incredible murals throughout the city. Particularly in Los Angeles, and in certain cities in the Bay, um, Denver. I mean, you'll see them all over the place. And I think very much your book is carrying it is part of that tradition. So I mean, it's a really fantastic book. I have a copy. I recommend everyone get that.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moving on to your next book, you mentioned before it began as a pamphlet, and before that you had published some articles. So where were these articles published?
I published various articles in different newspapers. I know, San Francisco Bayview newspaper. I had articles published in Socialist Viewpoint magazine. I had articles published in Under Lock and Key, a prisoner publication, a publication out for prisoners. Um, I mean, I would say maybe 10 different publications, and these were newsletters, newspapers, or movement magazines and stuff like this. So, these are the publications that California Prison Focus was another quarterly publication that I published, probably some of my better work and more lengthier work. And so these are publications that, they were movement publications, and they had a strong audience within the prison system. And I chose these for, of course, they were more sympathetic to the struggles of prisoners, but also my goal was to affect, to raise consciousness within the prisons. So this is my audience, the prisoners. In particular, what's called the lumpen population. And this population, in my opinion, is probably has the highest potential within these false U.S. borders for revolution, because this population is not bought off. So some people may look to the unions in the U.S. I would disagree with that, because in my opinion, you got these union members that are making 60, 80, $90 an hour or what have you. um, and if I talk to them about revolution and giving that up for the people, they're gonna tell me to get the hell out of here. So but you have the lumpen population, which is mostly prisoner. Most of the prison population derives from the lumpen, what is generally called the lumpen proletariat, but which me and others may just refer to as the lumpen, because the word proletariat here in U.S. borders in the first world is a little controversial, but that's another whole nother conversation. So the population of the lumpen, if you look at, in my opinion, the most advanced political organization um, that ever rose up within these false U.S. borders, in my opinion, was the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party made the highest advances, more than any other political group within the U.S., in my opinion. And if you look at the membership of the Black Panther Party, um, they recruited from the lumpen. They didn't recruit from the unions, from the factories and from the no, they recruited from the streets. Their members of the Black Panther Party were mostly, some weren't, but the majority were ex drug dealers and prostitutes. This is lumpen, and yet they injected a fire within the movement in U.S. borders that no other organization, in my opinion, has come close to. And this is why J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panther Party was the highest threat to national security at the time. And they didn't say that about any other group that I know of. But so, in my opinion, the lumpen is a very special group of people here in the U.S. In other countries, it wouldn't be like that. I would probably look more to the unions if I was in a third world country, and they're usually the most progressive and revolutionary. But here in the U.S., in my opinion, the lumpen are the ones that are gonna go all the way. They're the ones that will die, um, you know, fighting the oppressor, and not too many other people are going to do that. They might struggle and fight. They're not going to give their lives. A lot of people won't do that. So the lumpen population is very special to me. I derive from the lumpen population, and I see the potential that prisoners have. I've seen it when we had our hunger strike, the 2013 hunger strike against solitary confinement, where we had 33,000 prisoners go on hunger strike all at once. That made history. No factory workers ever went on strike 30,000 strong. So, and this lasted 60 days without food. So, I seen the potential in the prisoners, and I know that, it's going to take a lot of work, and there's a lot of different people. There's different groups working to raise consciousness in the prisons and the concentration camps. And in my opinion, although the entire Chicano nation needs attention, the entire Chicano nation needs to be mobilized. But um, you know, I believe that imprisoned Aslan holds the key to really igniting the movement outside of the prison walls. And it's not going to be easy. It's very difficult. And that's one of the things that I set out to do while I was in prison, is begin to create articles, to raise consciousness in publications that I knew my fellow prisoners were subscribing to, and like California Prison Focus, San Francisco Bayview newspaper, Under Lock and Key. All of these publications, every prison I've been to, every tier I've been on, somebody had these publications coming in. Usually every tier there's one or two people getting them in every single prison, in every single cell block. So these are publications that have a high level of subscribers in prison. So these are the publications that I focused on, and I continue to submit articles, raising consciousness, critiquing the state, critiquing our conditions, and this is what I did while I was there.
Yeah. Well, I think that I think that, yeah, so much of I just want to just a little quick response. I mean, so much of what you're saying, there's been like tremendous victories of trade unions and syndicalism, trade union syndicalism in the United States of America that have improved the lives of people. But there's no question about it that the trade union movement in the United States, and but let's just in the United States has protected its membership from both above and below. So yes, they protect it from the employers, but they also protect it from people who might who are not in that stratosphere. So like for instance, you have like the Teamsters, right? Notoriously white only union. I mean, or white majority union. You have the UFW. I mean, the UFW, they achieved tremendous things for the farm workers, and I don't want to say they didn't, because they absolutely did. Same time, they would call INS at the time, with La Migra people, right? That were being brought into as opposed to organizing those migrant workers, which would have been the noble thing to do, which would be the right thing to do, which would have been the thing to do that would prevent this once and for all from happening, right? To actually have a wing that would do that. The most notorious example in my mind is the AFL-CIO, which actually was used by the State Department to go into Ghana to try to destabilize the Kwame Nkrumah. So I mean, you really have like these imperialist unions, these unions with the United States of America serving kind of a double. They serve a double purpose, and so there's no question about it. The unions within the United States are not going to be the key.
No, and the thing about it is, and that's another controversial issue. Some go so far as to say there's a labor aristocracy in the U.S., and I think that they have some very strong points. I kind of agree with this, that there is these elite workers within U.S. borders. Just are, even without the pay range, if you look at the resources that um, we acquire, we have pensions, 401ks, we get vacation days, and so most workers in the U.S. have a stake in imperialism. Even if they don't want to admit it, they do have a stake in it, and not only that, we got healthcare where yeah, we can't get certain things, but we could walk into an emergency room. We could go to a drugstore. We could get medications that been tested on people in the third worlds. We can get fresh foods. We can go get fresh meat. And even if we don't have nothing, we can go into a church and we could go to the food banks. We have access to, there's a lot of stuff that we have access to live in the world. And America does that on purpose in order to attempt to buy off its population. And so yeah, there and of course, at some point, workers are going to have to, there's gonna have to be some change. Unfortunately today, that day is not here, and workers are not ready in the US. So at some point, I would agree, but today is not the day. And so and then UFW, actually in the Chicano Power and the Struggle for Islam book, we actually write about that, and offer a criticism. and because during the deep study that I partook in, I did learn about the wet line that many people don't know about. Crazy, horrible, like come on. So there's some things that were done and they were corrected after a couple of years, but that's never going to be forgotten. And hopefully the UFW of today learned important lessons from that period. But we also have to remember the UFW is not a socialist organization. They're not a revolutionary organization, so we cannot really expect more from them when they are not socialist. If they were, and we discussed this in the book, if they were, I think the right position would have been to create a united front with workers on both sides of the border in an international gesture of working class solidarity. And then I think that it would have helped the UFW and the Mexican proletariat that was coming over the border. And I think that would have been the correct path to go forward in. But yeah, there's a lot of that's why it's important to learn our history, because some people they say, hey, why are you reading about that and that happened in the 1960s? Well, it's important because we need to learn about lessons like the wet line and all of these things that our people have done in order to learn for the future what we will not do. So yeah, it's there's so much. And then the trade unions, at in the early part of the 20th century, they didn't even let Raza into the unions. Raza had to make their own little mutual aid societies and all these collaborations because white unions would not let the Raza into the union. And the thing about it is, um, it may be controlled by white labor. Like white labor in America controls the unions, but when we walk, we drive down the street and see all the construction, all the buildings going up. It's brown labor that is actually doing the work today. And so, this is a contradiction that we have to find a way to resolve because, as the numbers of Raza are becoming the majority in this country. So the population as a whole is browning here in the United Snakes. So if that's the case, it's not necessarily going to be automatically a good thing. It can be a great thing. This can be the majority of people can be a revolutionary force. That would be beautiful. However, the possibility also exists that we end up with the majority of reactionary, brown, proud Americans. And that is a problem, and that helped the colonizer. So the need for political education and consciousness raising is very strong today before we become the majority. We want to be able to get this brown labor force on our side, on the side of revolution and the side of righteousness and liberation before we become the majority, and end up the majority, colonizing protectors. So colonizer protectors. So we want to make sure that we have to work hard right now, in order to, and that's why shows like yours, this show right here is very important. These interviews that you're doing, social media, very important. We need more radio. We need more publications. We need not just online publications. We need more print. We need more newspapers, newsletters, magazines, that explain things for Raza in our interests and for the people of the world as well. So very important.
So I have a few things to kind of to ask you, and I'm curious your responses. But before we do that, we have a question from the audience. It says it's from Mike Bravo. He says, "Question for Joey: What ways does he think we can mobilize Chicanos in the street, lumpen?" And he says the Nation of Islam seems to do pretty well, albeit they come from a prophesizing oriented culture. What are some ways you feel we can make some ground on that mobilizing?
I think that's a great question, Mike Bravo, and I've seen some of his work online as well. I think that it's going to take people within the barrios in order to transform the barrios. So, and I love those who are working out here. I love the people from different political organizations, different whether they're political parties, whether they're mass organizations, whether they're cadre organizations, revolutionary cadre organizations. I love all the people out here that are struggling. However, if in we're not going to be able to, in my opinion, have people from a political party who come from maybe a different background, different class background, maybe from academia. um, these people are not going to be able to go into the barrio, no matter how educated, how politically conscious they are, and transform the barrios. So it's going to take people from the barrios throughout Aslan and beyond. We have people in New York, we have Chicanos in Chicago, all over. So it's going to take people from these barrios to transform their own barrios. And it's going to be, like the saying goes, each one teach one. And it's going to be a slow process, but that's what needs. And because the people from the barrios speak the same language, and it can't be, people, it's gonna have to be righteous people. It's not gonna, we can't, expect people from the barrios who, they, went and testified against dozens of people and changed their life, and then they're trying to go into the barrio and have these the people, the raza, listen to them. They're gonna say, if they make it out the barrio, they're gonna try and get the hell out of here. So it's gonna have to be righteous people, people that did not commit crimes against the people in the barrio. It's gonna have to be people who are respected in the barrio. It's gonna have to be people that come from the barrio but have been politically conscious and are respectable, and and still good in the people's eyes of the street. And these are the people that these are the people that are going to be listened to. And like I said, I think lumping organizations as well, it's a very tough nut to crack. However, lumping organizations are going to have to, transform, at least, in some way, in order for this process to begin as well. And that's something that's very difficult, because you have the pull of capitalism, that people are born and they aspire to be capitalists. They're like wannabe capitalists, coming from the barrios, and so and then there's the thing of criticism, and you got to be careful with that too. So there's a lot of elements, but we've seen it happen with the Young Lords Party, and the Puerto Rican. It was once a lumpen organization. Some of the leaders went to prison. They became politicized. They get out of prison. They transformed the entire lumpen organization into a revolutionary political party, the Young Lords Party. So we've seen it happen before. And who knows? Maybe California isn't the center for the Chicano nation. Maybe this development that I'm talking about, of course, there's little pockets. There's people like me who come from the barrios, who went to prison, who continue to be righteous people, whether inside prison or outside prison, who did not commit crimes against the people, to the point where people are not going to hear what I have to say. Um, and there's small pockets of people like this. However, we're looking at it from a California thing, and many people are saying, you know what, lumping organizations in California, I don't know if they're gonna, but we can't look at California like that, because we don't know how things will develop. Maybe California isn't the center for this transformation of the lumping population. Maybe that center is in Chicago. Maybe it's in Florida. And wherever that begins, that process, just like the Young Lords Party, just like many other things, just like the lumpen organizations themselves, that some were created here, and then now we see them in Texas and New York and Florida and this. Well, I think the same can be done with lumpen revolutionary organizations, or those organizations that transform into revolutionary organizations. The same method, the same thing can happen, where it starts in, say, Chicago, and then next you know in Florida and in New York. And if you know, and so we don't know how that's going to develop, but in my opinion, I think that any true transformation is going to come from within the lumpen. It's going to come from people of the barrio, and that's how it's going to be. And I think that um people coming out of prison, it's important that we connect these people, these conscious prisoners that are being released, that we connect them with groups and organizations outside of prison, in order to affect real change in the barrios. And it's going to be a slow process, but this is the only way, in my opinion, that this is going to occur.
Yeah. I think one of the things we got to really look at, though, we have an abundance of reality in a desert of analysis, right? Like we have the fact of the matter, we're talking about the browning of America and the possibilities within the browning of America. I mean, yeah, I agree with you, but I think that there's a lack of analysis about the browning of America. I mean, if you look at let's say, for instance, the political rise of Donald Trump. Donald Trump made the centerpiece of his political rise the concept that there are too many Mexicans in the United States of America, and that makes it not America, right? So he very keenly, and his supporters very keenly understand the browning of America. They get it, right? They understand the possibility of these things. They even talked about taco trucks on every corner. They talked about protecting themselves from Dora the Explorer. They talked about these silly things, these silly inane things that to them were life and death issues, right? To them, they were life and death issues because it was the loss of the cultural integrity of a place they were willing to kill for, essentially, right?
Mm.
And so they get that. On the other side, there's this kind of idea that it's insignificant, it doesn't really matter, or we're simply not going to talk about it. We're the least represented group in terms of our numbers in film, media, television, all the commanding heights of disinformation. We're the least represented group. So amongst us, we don't really have this. We understand that our numbers are growing, but we don't see that our numbers are growing. We don't feel that our numbers are growing in these avenues of thought and of thinking and of understanding of the nation as a whole, or the country, or the nation state, or however you want to frame it. We're not allowed that information. We're not allowed to process that and think about that. So we have to create these we have to create these things ourselves, I feel. So what can we do to combat these giant um, machines, like NBC, Paramount, the New York Times. And these are giant things. What can we as individuals, in creating alternative news? I mean, how do we do this? How do we overcome these? How do we slay the beast?
I th- I mean, I think that you know um, there's an abundance of technology and resources in this country, but I think that the people, I think that when it comes to the people themselves, um, the people have proven time and again that advanced technology and advanced, technology, weapons, etc., doesn't mean nothing. We seen during the war, the U.S. war on Vietnam. You have the first world. You have a country that's the most technologically advanced. They have these billion-dollar bombs that they're, carpet bombing. These are people that were fighting in sandals with a sack of rice and an AK-47 around their shoulder, in the jungles, barefoot, in sandals. So, and that was a good example that superior technology means nothing. And yet the people persevered, and they won that. They won that war. So I think that we could take a good example from the Vietnamese people, that superior technology means nothing. So yeah, they have these billion-dollar industry, publishing houses and etc. But if we look at the varios, who in the hell is subscribing to the New York Post or the Wall Street Journal? Nobody. You know who in the hell is sitting at home? I'm not gonna lie. I put it on sometimes and watch CNN. To analyze the enemy's politics. But who in the hell in the video? What videos are everybody sitting around? Let's watch CNN tonight, homie. They not doing that. They are not doing that, right? The varios know. This is what the varios know. They know
Yeah.
you hand them something in their hand, and it has a good graphic on it, cool graphic, revolutionary, prison art style. Like, hey, what? Who in the hell did this? And they're gonna read something you hand them to, not something that they have to subscribe online. To the New York Times. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. And so I think that when it comes to the Chicano Nation, that this is where we actually have the upper hand in our barrios, in our communities, because um, the capital, yeah, they might see it on billboards, they might go to school and hear it, or changing the channel and see something, but for the most part, they're not paying attention to a lot of the capitalist propaganda newspapers, online stuff, news on TV. So we can, I think that we're gonna have to go back to, because we're trying to think too ahead with these online publications and stuff, which are good. I like them. I like reading stuff online, but I know that the majority of the barrio doesn't, and they're gonna look at you like you're crazy. So I think that we have to, in with our people in the barrios, we have to go back to printing out newsletters and newspapers, and because this is what our people understand, and not only the Chicano people, but also um, the Mexicano, the Mexicano people, the migrants. The migrants ain't gonna subscribe to New York Times, Washington Post. They're gonna, but if you hand them a newsletter that's written in Spanish and that has a picture of one of their compañeros on the front, or the elote man on the front, and they see an article, that's going to catch their interest, and they're going to read about that. And then if you provide, political analysis of the elotero, and how he's really connected to struggling against America, then we're going to, we have a better position there. So I think that in order to reach the barrio, that we have to go back. We have to, we're trying to be too advanced, and you know what, I got online publication and I'm doing this on. We have to go back to the basics, because this is what the barrio understands. Some of the barrio is very technical, technical savvy, they computer savvy or whatever, but um, the lumpen people, no, they're gonna get something in their hand that visually, that attracts them, some graphics, just like they did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So I think that that's gonna be the real key in the barrio, is going back and creating these newspapers and newsletters, and begin saturating the barrios from California to New York, with revolutionary publications again. And I think that that's what's going to help us, not only for the Chicano people, but the migrants as well. And that's what's going to do it. We can't go up to a migrant and say, "Hey, I started this podcast, or check out." Even though I love my radio show, Free Aslan, I can't go into the field and say, "Hey, listen to Free Aslan." There, you can listen online. If you're not in Oakland, they're gonna be like, whatever. But if I go to the field and I hand them a newsletter with a picture of one of their compañeros who's working in the field, and they're reading about their own story, that's going to catch their interest. They're going to want it again. Like, where's the next one at? Hey, come back, bring us another. So I think that that's something that we should all begin discussing, is the revival of these newsletters and newspapers again.
Absolutely. And just as we're talking about the basics, though, let's move the conversation to something a little fancier. So you're kind of fancy, man. You got a documentary coming out.
Ah, a little bit. I try not to be, man, but sometimes, well, the thing about it is I was approached by Charlie Trujillo, Choose My House Publishing here in San Jose, and he does documentaries, does films. He's done a film of his own of his experience in Vietnam, called Soldados, and so he knows what he's doing, and he approached me and said, "Hey, I want to do a documentary on you. And what do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely," because I know that tomorrow's not promised for nobody. I mean, we're here today, we're gone tomorrow, and that doesn't mean physically gone. It can mean anything. People get sick, they become incapacitated. There's car accidents. There's all kinds of stuff. There's COINTELPRO. I mean, there's so many possibilities that I know that, I didn't want to do it at first. And then I said, you know what? I think it's important because it's important that, if we have something to say, that we make sure that history has framed it for us. And so I said, okay. So he created this documentary, and it's called A Portrait of Solitude, and so this is mostly about my experience in solitary confinement, and it goes into my childhood a little bit. It goes into in the life in the concentration camps, solitary confinement, and then it comes out here. It talks a little bit about my radio program, and the books, and so it's a really good documentary, and it's going to be, the premiere is coming out April 24th. That's Friday, April 24th at 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And it's going to be on Zoom, and it's a Choose My House and the San Jose State University Culture Counts reading series. And so these are the people that are putting it together. Choose My House filmed it. San Jose State is presenting, doing the premiere, and because of this virus going around, this COVID virus, we can't, unfortunately, we can't be there physically to have this premiere. So we're going to do it online. It's going to be on Zoom. And so you can contact me through Facebook. I'll share the link. I've shared the link already. And so you can see anybody who's watching this who wants to check it out. If you're my Facebook friend, if not, you can request me and then look on the timeline. It's on there. I'll post it again, probably today, tomorrow. Continue to post it. Joey Villarreal, on Facebook. And so I'm going to continue to post it, and I'll be tagging you as well, Matt. So hopefully you can check it out. And, so if you're a friend of Matt's, you should be able to see it as well. I'll be tagging him as well.
What we can also do is we can put it in the conversation thread. We can put the post in the. There's a
Oh,
conversation thread following this video as well.
that'll work.
Um, yeah. So Portrait of Solitude. That's beautiful. I know. You've in the past on your radio show, you've had Ernesto Ayala on, you had me and Karina on, and so we really from the TJ team, we really appreciate you and all the work that you do, and giving us a platform to come speak as well.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah, I love your guys' work too. You guys, man, I think about it, and there's a handful of people doing some very good work, and if we were under different conditions in a different society, it would be cool for us to all be in the same building, in the same department, doing some great work. We do excellent work. But all of it's good that we're spread out and we do work in our own ways, and it's all beautiful. It's all toward the same goal. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, So I one final question. What so I've been opposing this to everybody who has some background in Marxist readings, whether whatever line or affiliation they find themselves, just general historical materialism. Why is it that the capitalist system cannot just completely fails to address the needs of people in the middle of a health pandemic?
Mm. In the middle of a health pandemic, I think, Marx himself explained how capitalism is going to fail. I mean, it's going to fail eventually. Lenin touched on that as well, the withering away of of capitalism. But under this COVID, I think it highlights it. I think it highlights the vulnerability of capitalism because, well, because we're born and raised into it, and people around the world see capitalism as, this all powering, this, oh my God, you cannot stop it. And yet this this virus, pointed out, highlighted its contradictions. It highlighted that, and it's I think it's a great opportunity for revolutionary people, organizations, and people to. It's a concrete example. Before COVID, we can talk to somebody on the street, and yet our examples of why capitalism is bad, um, those examples would be, they would basically be like, you know, just some kind of long distance idea that has no connection to today's reality. We would try to connect it, and people would say, I don't know. I mean, I go to start do this and I get that. But during this virus, I think that it highlighted that, after so many deaths, I think it highlighted that capitalism, it's almost like an anarchy of production, where, people are just producing like crazy, and they're creating the stuff that we don't need, but they can sell really fast. And yet when a virus like this hits, it shows that the state is unprepared to, provide or protect the people within its borders, and that's a problem, because the ultimate goal of any country, of any government, should be the protection of its people, the safety and security of its people. We see great examples of that in Cuba, where they protect their people. They have it organized to the point where, and that's because they're not a capitalist country, by the way. It's a socialist country. And the thing about it is, when you have your society, your cities organized, not only city by city, but neighborhood by neighborhood, and even block by block, that's organization. That's an organized society, to the point where you have committees for, every block, every neighborhood, so that if some, just like we seen the same thing in Cuba with the earthquakes, when the floods, they hardly had no deaths. They went in there, and they're organized by neighborhood, by block. They go in there. The people are informed. They're educated. What do you need? They got everything prepared. Disaster preparedness. Here, under capitalism, it showed us that not only when we don't have viruses, it's every person for themselves. If you don't have money, you don't eat. But when we have these pandemics, um, you're literally dying. I mean, people are dying in the thousands here. There's not even supplies. They talk about all these countries. I remember before the COVID, the capitalist propaganda media would show pictures of Venezuela with the shelves empty, and and put all this propaganda out. But now, there's all these shelves empty. I've went in the stores and seen empty shelves, and yet this is supposed to be capitalism. What, they're supposed to, they're promoting it like this is a better way to live, but in actuality it is not, because Cuba is a much poorer country, and none of, you're not seeing thousands and tens of thousands of deaths like we're seeing here. So I think that capitalism has showed us that, you know um, you know this might have really, been, the sign of its last gasp. It's really to the point where people, even people that had faith in the system, now understand what kind of system capitalism is. It has nothing. You're told to stay in your house. What if you don't have nothing in your house? If this were, in my opinion, if this were, a revolutionary society that we lived in, people would be coming door to door, knocking on our doors, making sure we're okay. What do we need? Bringing us to the local, center or auditorium so that we could be informed, educated. We can have supplies and everybody to ensure that nobody's dying, that nobody's forgotten. And that's the difference between, I think, a capitalist system and a socialist system. I think a socialist system, cares dearly about humanity, and will give their lives in order to protect lives. I think capitalism, is a society that, cares so much about profit, um, that, they will not only watch other people, they would watch family and friends die. I mean, everything is for sale under capitalism. Everything, and so it's a very selfish, form of organizing societies, and I think that this COVID, has highlighted that we are really on our own, and that we are, it is really up to us to, work together to find a different way of organizing society, even within a capitalist, country like this. Even within this kind of country, there's things like creating things like dual power, community control. There's things about organizing our barrios, our communities, people within, our neighbors. Start off with our neighbors, and branch out to our street, and then organize our neighborhoods. And I think that, we're gonna have to, work harder on that, and I think more people can be won over, now that we have some examples, like either we can organize together to make sure we're okay, or we can rely on the government and know they don't give a damn about us. So I think that this is a great opportunity. It's unfortunate, it's horrible, but it's a great opportunity for, organizers, to highlight these contradictions and to bring more people on the side of justice, on our side. So I think this, it has its bad, but there's some great opportunities, that we can use from, this horrible tragedy that we're experiencing now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In crisis there's opportunity. So, I thank you so much, Joy, for joining us. We're gonna post all the links to everything you shared, your books, as well as the upcoming documentary.
And
We'll get a huh
the radio station too.
the
The
radios and the station too.
86.1 FM, or you can listen online every Tuesday at 8 p.m. At pourmagazine.org/radio. And that's free Aslan, by the way.
Free Aslan. All right, and no better words to end on. Free Aslan.
Thank you, brother. Yes, sir. Absolutely.